Welcome to the Making Schools Work podcast, a podcast for everyone in education. This show is brought to you by the Southern Regional Education Board. At SREB, we believe that every school has the potential to be great. Whatever you do in the school, whatever your job may be, let's talk about things that make schools work.
Welcome to the SREB Making Schools Work podcast. I'm Daniel Rock, and I'm here with Ashley Shaw. How are you, Ashley?
I am great. How are you?
I am wonderful, and I'm so excited because today we have a featured presenter from our summer conference as part of our featured presenter series. Today's guest is Dr. Nicole Cobb, a professor of practice in the human and organizational development and professional education and academic affairs at Vanderbilt University. Currently, she's on Governor Bill Lee's Special Appointed Counsel for Career and Technical Education. Nicole Cobb knows her stuff. She's going to really help us today think about career readiness in schools. Welcome, Nicole. How are you?
I'm doing great, Daniel. Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here with both of you today.
So what we want to learn about today is ways that teachers and leaders can align what's happening in their schools and what is expected and needed in jobs. Can you talk about some of your research around career readiness and soft skills in education?
I love talking about my research. It looks at a school climate, the relationships, expectations, rules, policies, how a student feels physically safe, emotionally safe, and that sense of belonging they have at school. And how does that climate shape their ability to learn career readiness skills and social emotional learning competencies so that they'll be successful in their next transition, whether that's going to middle school, high school, post-secondary, or right into the workforce. A lot of us think about career readiness as checking boxes, these technical skills and competencies, but my work adds that human side to things, self-awareness in the workplace, communication, critical thinking, problem solving. How do teachers who have so much on their plate already add teaching these skills and competencies within their content?
It sounds like you really try to live in both worlds, the work world and the school world. You know, I think about counselors, right? Counselors' careers are in schools.
Yeah.
But yet their job is to connect kids with the world of work, or not, that's not their job. One of their many jobs.
It is though, yes.
Is to help
career
them think of that. But they maybe haven't had the experiences. They might have a deep understanding of what it's like to work out in a variety of different careers. This might not be their second, third, or fourth career. So I imagine that's a challenge for some people in schools. I'm just wondering, what are some of the big findings that you talk about when you give talks?
It's bigger than just my research. I want to just note that a lot of what I pull from are surveys happening in the US, in the UK, and global markets. Part of what I do is synthesize that with the so what to teachers. Why should they care? And what does this mean in their day-to-day practice? And for school counselors too. What we are seeing consistently, and I'll just quote some things from 2025, the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report identified analytical thinking, creative problem solving, decision making, communication, being adaptable as the types of skills that new hires will need, that humans need to be successful in the workplace and really in life. They noted that 39% of core worker skills are going to change by 2030. We're already in 2026, so I like to think about we are training our students to be successful in jobs that don't even exist yet.
Yeah.
And then if we throw AI into this, how do we AI proof our students so that we are preparing them to be globally competitive in occupations that they can get?
AI is kind of the big elephant in all the rooms, isn't it? It looms over this concept of career readiness. We don't know, is it going to create jobs? Is it going to eliminate jobs? Do you need to have AI skills like you used to need to have computer literate skills to be successful? That's got to be a really, you work with people preparing to be teachers.
Yeah, I think we all, our students, but even us, we need AI skills. But we've really got to think about, how do you ethically use this new technology? And what does that look like? I'll show my age here, but I can remember when we first got spell check and professors thought that's cheating. You shouldn't be able to use Grammarly or spell check. And now that's just, we expect everybody. So, I think AI has the ability to help us be more efficient, to help us put things together more quickly, but we shouldn't just be using it without it thoughtfully using. And right now, there are things it cannot do that only humans can do. I think we want to leverage teaching our students those skills that will keep us competitive.
I want to dig into what those skills are. Before you've had many careers in your young life, right? You've been a teacher, you've worked in law, you've worked in marketing. Am I correct in that? But probably more.
You are very correct. I like to explore. I don't know what I want to do with
job. She's a dabbler. So we're going to talk about how schools prepare students for that world. When you reflect on your education before you graduate high school, how do you feel your schooling prepared you? Do you feel like you had the skills you needed to be successful out of high school?
Absolutely not. No, I definitely didn't. I went to a very small rural school where it was very much, there's the career track for the students that aren't going to college, and then there's the college track, and those two never meet or cross paths.
So we do a lot of interviews with students, and we ask students about what they want to learn about that they don't learn in school. And one of the funniest responses I get, and I get this almost every time, is they'll say, I want to learn how to balance a checkbook, manage my finances. They always say balance a checkbook. And I'm just like, I've not used a checkbook in like 30 years.
I don't have a checkbook.
No one has a checkbook. So when I hear that, I'm like, there's a disconnect between the skills that some people perceive that they need and what's actually needed in the real world. So, Nicole, can you talk about what people in the workplace leaders want students to be able to do out of high school that are the key skills that they're looking for?
I did focus groups with business and industry all across the country, and several themes have emerged. They're not new or surprising, but I think it's important we keep coming back to it. The number one thing is communication, working on teams, being able to get along with and do a task with somebody that maybe isn't your favorite person, creative and critical thinking. Things going a little deeper, like taking initiatives. I'll talk about a new employee coming in, and they're okay if you give them the task list and tell them exactly what you want them to do. But that's not how managers work. They want you to take some initiative to say, oh, I see this needs to be done, and then come to their manager when they have questions or want to collaborate and problem solve. And so they're seeing new hires struggling in that area. And then we hear things around professional dress, attendance, follow through, those kinds of things.
So much in what you're saying that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Communication is fascinating because you can't AI communication in terms of standing up in front of a group and sharing your thoughts.
Yep.
I go to so many classes and I see great examples, but I also see kids reading a PowerPoint word for word and sitting down, and the teacher not giving feedback or setting a rubric or expectations around that.
Yeah, I see that too. As teachers, we've got to model what to do. I often observe teachers too, and sometimes I see teachers doing similar things to what you describe. The content lacks engagement. So the first thing I'm going to say is let's model it, and that might mean getting out of our comfort zone with how we present our content and how we instructionally design our lessons. But I also think sometimes as adults or teachers, we assume students know certain things like body language, how to make eye contact, how do you stand when you're giving a presentation, what do you do with your hands?
Yeah.
Those are all skills. Just as important as maybe a technology, teaching a student how to use Canva, how to use PowerPoint, how to use Excel, we want to teach them the skills of how to stand, how to project your voice, tone of voice. That all has to be part of the same lesson.
Do you ever see schools where that's not up to each individual teacher, but the leadership has said, we want to prioritize this thing, and we want all of our teachers thinking about and working on communication, working on teams? Like, have you seen schools systematically do that and not leaving it to individual teachers?
I think you see some schools do a piece of it. So they'll have a theme we're focusing on this month. It's teamwork or communication or something like that. But I think where they often miss the boat too is it's like, okay, teachers, this is our theme this month. Integrate this into your classes. But there's no training of the teachers for how to do that. And I just want to acknowledge our teachers have a lot on their plate. They are trying to stick with pacing guides. They're evaluated with high-stakes testing. If we're asking them to embed this into their instruction, we've got to teach them how to do that.
Yeah. I'm thinking about taking the initiative and how I would teach that in an English class or a math class or a PE class. Does anything come to your mind? I'm blanking.
Yeah, I think when we think about taking initiative, we're thinking about what that looks like in the business world of project management.
Yeah.
And so if you are the teacher and you've given your students a big paper, often think of like PBLs that you're doing that are multidisciplinary. So to take initiative, you can have them set up a tracker of what are the big tasks for this project. If you're in a group, who's going to own the task? Like the responsible person. We do these all the time, right? Like I bet SREB has a strategic plan and you have your task and your objectives and who's going to own it and what is the benchmarks and the due dates. You know, how often does a student get to see what that looks like prior to the workplace? And we can build those same structures around any project that you're giving your student.
You're also saying that I could see I'm doing projects throughout the year. And if I have 5 of these, let's say as a school, we're going to focus, like we believe, or that working on teams, creative thinking, taking initiative, professional dress, maybe emphasizing one at a time based on our projects, right? Like taking initiative, I might say for this project, I really want to see you all in my class take initiative. Here's what that means. Here are some examples of what that would look like. While you guys work together or individually, I want to see you do something outside of what's just written down. I want to see you take a leap.
I think there are ways, even outside of a lesson, that you can do these things in your classrooms. For example, I always make a big deal at the beginning of the semester about trying to tell the student, you're in charge of your grade in this class. If you know you're going to miss a deadline, if you come to me first, I will give you an extension. But if you come to me afterwards and you turn in late work, you're not going to be able to make it up. It's an example of taking initiative, that you're in charge of knowing when the deadlines are, of coming to me and asking, I will work with you, but you've got to tell me because I don't know your schedule. The same thing when they send me an email. I need to know this information in the email. You need to say, what's the assignment you're talking about? What's your specific question? Don't just say, why is this my grade? What did you notice in my feedback? Even though it's not a specific lesson, because there's things that they're going to need to do when they have a job that aren't just the lesson that I'm doing in class that day.
Yeah, I love that, Ashley. And I think we want to do more of that so that it is directly related to the real world and what they'll have to do later.
If you write me an email that's all, the letter U, didn't without an apostrophe, and grade my work with no period and no capitalization, I'm not going to respond to your request. You're going to write me an email that's written in complete sentences, the student, not you, Nicole.
Right.
You can write, I'll give you a pass because you're our special guest and featured presenter. But if a student writes me that email, I'm going to not respond to it. In this classroom, we communicate in an academic setting.
What about professionalism, appropriate audiences?
Yeah.
The only tweak I would say is instead of not responding, because we think as adults, the student is like, oh, my professor didn't respond. They're like, yeah, they're just unresponsive. I email them and they don't email me back. I usually would reply to the email and say, please rewrite this email based on professionalism.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh,
Yeah.
I guess I have to do that, especially in middle and high schools. And most of my work has been in urban school districts, but often we think students understand what professionalism is, and let's say they're writing or communicating.
Yeah.
And again, we've got to teach that. I have so many students that don't know they really shouldn't use emojis in a professional context or,
Right.
LOL. Once you teach it to them, I've seen students never do it again. But
Yeah.
I can't tell you the number of times when I'm working, especially with freshmen, and they say, you're the first person that's told me why. And so we talk about how do you talk to your friends and how do you text? And then how do you talk to me as Dr. Cobb? That has to look different. And how you talk to your mom might be different than your friends. So we spend a lot of time setting up what these things look like and then giving them time to practice it.
And I want to say that I sometimes have students that do the opposite of all this, and that's problematic too, where they think academic or professional writing is basically, I've had students tell me they get high AI scores and they'll come to me and say, I didn't use AI. And it turns out they kind of did, where they'll take a thesaurus function and just change every single word so it sounds more formal. And I'm like, I don't know what you're trying to say here.
Right.
It doesn't make sense, but they're trying so hard to be professional. And I try to also make a point that being professional means you have a really good idea and you're stating it in a way that everybody understands it. It's not having to use words you don't even know the meaning of the word.
Right. Yeah.
That's not what professional means either.
You couldn't be more right.
If I'm a teacher and I've set a goal for myself, which I want to build more of these career-ready soft skills into my instruction, into my curriculum, what are some starter moves that they could make that you would recommend to folks?
The first thing I always say is let's look at your lesson plans, your unit plans, what you're already teaching. Let's not scrap that and start from blank paper. Let's look at what you already have and see where we can embed some of these competencies. We know that chunking is a good strategy and intervention for students. Just like we think about how we chunk our English or our math or our science content, we want to think about how we chunk teaching students professional and social emotional learning competencies. One of the first things I always think about is how can we take our content? I'm a previous English teacher, and I loved teaching the books and the things that I taught, but sometimes they weren't really tied to the real world. How might I rethink some of my intros, my hooks, my assignments that tie to a real world scenario? In math, maybe I'm not just having them work an equation, but I'm having them analyze what's the most efficient way to get the solution and why. So it's not that you can just work it out. We're probably all in the same age group. I remember having to show my work on things where they don't have to do that now, but we want them to think about, why did you solve it that way? Maybe there's multiple ways to solve a problem, but not everyone is the most efficient. I even think sometimes as teachers, we give a little too much or show them the right way. If you're a science teacher, present a flawed design, an experiment that didn't work, and how would they redo it so that it's better, so that it's not flawed? You're making them approach the work in a different way that naturally has them having to problem solve, communicate, be on a team.
That's the kind of thing that's going to get you far. If you can enter a job and find efficiencies or find ways to solve problems without asking everybody else. I mean, yes, you want to get help, but if you're the guy who can look at it and say, there's another way to do this, let me think about it, explain it, you're going to be very successful. And so in a classroom, you can have students practice that with anything they're doing.
And we want these things because it's what sets the best apart, right? These are people that have these skills. That's who gets promoted.
Yeah. A lot of your work is coaching and collaborating with teachers. So as our final conversation, I would like our listeners to hear what that conversation sounds like. And so Ashley has brought a lesson that she's taught or is going to teach. And what I'd like you to do is talk to her about some tweaks she might make that would help infuse some of these skills into her class. So Ashley, before you start, just give us a little context about what the class is, who the students are, and what you're trying to teach them, and I'll hand it over to the two of you.
This is a composition class. They're learning basic writing skills, essays, a little bit more advanced than high school because it is a first-year college class, but it is high school students taking it. It's all dual enrolled students. So they're 16, 17 years old, taking an English class. In another episode, which everybody can go back and listen to with Marty, our SREB coach, we talked about an assignment I do for primary research where I have the students, we basically do a murder mystery a game in class, and they have to be, they're the police officers investigating, and they have to figure out all the clues and everything, and then they write it up as a police report. It's a half essay. It's still an essay format, kind of using. So we talked in depth about putting CTE in depth. I thought that was at the unit lesson. That was the overall assignment for that unit, for the primary research unit. I thought it might be good to look at an assignment that goes with that, but just an in-class lesson. I have a lesson that I do when I'm teaching them how to write introductions, body paragraphs, and conclusions, where I give them for homework an Encyclopedia Brown story, which if you don't remember, if anybody read those as a kid, it's a little kid's for third grade, very low level. A little kid who's a detective, Encyclopedia Brown, he's very smart. He goes and solves mysteries. And then at the end of the story, it's like, who do you think did it? And you have to turn to the back to get the solution and why that's the solution. So anyway, it's very easy for them to do. It's all solved for them because the point of this activity isn't for them to solve it like it is with the murder mystery game. It's to write up the report. Then I put them in groups and they basically walk through the introduction, forming the thesis, and then they do some body paragraphs and they do a conclusion. By the end, each group has written kind of a mini 5-paragraph essay, not a full essay like they're going to do, but they can use them as samples. I give everybody access to every one, and they have about 4 or 5 samples of what kind of that report looks like, of the whodunit that they can use when they're working on their actual paper. So that's kind of my activity.
Thanks, Ashley. I do want to be transparent. Ashley shared this with me before, so I have had a little bit of time to think about it. But I really first want to highlight something you do so well, and maybe listeners wouldn't have picked up on it the same way I would. But when you talked about the previous podcast and how you have them write it up as a police report, that's really a high leverage skill. As an English teacher, we are traditionally trained to teach students very traditional writing, the 5-paragraph essay. From my research and this work is that the more we can have them write in formats that would be the way you would actually have to write for certain careers and jobs, that's really beneficial because many students can't transfer that knowledge of here's how you take a English paper and then turn it into a report if you're a police officer, or even just giving your boss a summary on a project. Your lesson plan is so strong pedagogically. This makes it easy for me to think about how we might embed SEL and career readiness into it. So the first thing I thought about is, after they've done their homework, you have them together before you're putting them in groups, having every student write down a personal goal they have for the group work today. And having them as a group before they start this task, setting some group norms. What are we all going to agree to as we're working in a group today? Students might say, everybody's going to have input. We'll respect the idea, even if we disagree with it, or respect the person, even if we disagree with the idea. But have them think through, what are we going to agree to work in a group? Because that's what they're going to have to do if they're put into a team, in the workplace.
So if I'm doing that, is that like a beginning of the semester, working with them to set group norms that we use all semester? Is it individual groups? Is it every project? How would you do that?
Yeah, so what I do is a combination of what you described. I try to model it in my first class every semester of every class I teach. I go through an activity of we set group norms in that class, and it's on blank paper, and we kind of do an activity to work through that. So they are modeling how I'm teaching it and how we come up with it. And then I actually take a picture of them on the first day. I put it in a frame with our norms. Everybody signs it, and that is our contract for the semester. But for the purposes of when I put them in groups, and most of my work, I like students working in groups. I think it's important. I make them do it just for their group. So every group, they're going to come up with similar things, but they word it very differently. But I want them to practice having to navigate it without me as the teacher facilitating, and that they don't just get the easy pass. Oh, we already have our norms. Let's jump in. Maybe I don't have them do that every time they're in a group, but at least once I want them to practice what it's like to have to figure it out. So yeah. As I looked at your lesson plan, to just start with introductions, this is a great place, I think, as a teacher, you could teach social awareness and relationship skills. This is going to be more in the debrief after they've done some of this work and you're reflecting on it and talking through what they've done. Asking questions like, how are you making sure everyone has shared at least one idea for the hook? What's one way your group is building on each other's ideas rather than replacing them? Whose idea hasn't been heard yet? Thinking about airtime. Sometimes in our groups, we have students that they're extroverts. They always have an idea. They can talk nonstop. And some of our deep, reflective thinkers are happy to stay quiet and let the extroverts run with it. So those are some samples of discussion questions. Having them think about what's the best evidence that supports their thesis when they move into writing the body paragraph? What reasoning did they use to include or exclude details? You can't put everything in it. Maybe you give them a page limit where they have to. There's probably things they really want to put in, but there's not enough words to do that.
And you'd be surprised, students, obviously I have students that don't meet the minimum. That's not surprising, but I have so many students that always go over, and teaching them that that's just, like, they think, look, I am doing good. I wrote a 20-page paper instead of a 5-page paper. I did great. And I have to teach them that probably means you didn't proofread. Your topic was too broad. You didn't follow the assignment. Like, we still have to work on that too.
I get that too. I think that's a career readiness skill. If they have a page limit, I tell them I quit reading and grading at the page limit. Because when they're in the workplace and their boss says, I want X, they're not going to sit and read a 3-page email. So it's a skill to learn. How do you cover what needs to be covered clearly and concisely? That's an important writing skill. When we have the activities that are already set up really well, how are we thinking about the questions we ask our students that make them go a little deeper than just the assignment and content knowledge? Are we calling out the why as to why we're asking this? I'm having you set group norms today in your small groups because I want you to be really successful when you're at an internship site or you're in your first job and you get put on a team with maybe not everyone that you're friends with or you don't know well, or maybe even some people you don't like. So we're going to practice that in here so that you feel ready for it later.
I wrote my master's thesis on how to teach CTE in the class, how to teach soft skills, communication, work, creative thinking, problem solving. That's what I focused on. Most of my lessons focus on that too. But one thing you just said that I know I'm bad at, that I need to be better at, is making it more direct. I know what the links are, so I just assume they're going to get them. I don't always point out, hey, I'm having you do this group project because we're working on teamwork, so that when you have a job and you have to work in groups, you know what you're doing. I don't make those connections. I want them to make them, and I should say, there's a reason I'm doing the things I'm doing.
We all struggle with that. Even like this is my world, and I don't always do it in my own classes. It's a growth area for all of us, but it happens all the time when I do student focus groups. I'll say, do you think your teachers are preparing you to go into the workforce and know how to communicate and problem solve? And they were like, yeah, we don't really do that. And their teachers are like listening to the recording and saying, but we do, like in every assignment, in every class I give an activity that we are doing those things. The students don't connect those dots in the same way. Let's go back to developmental psychology, Erikson, Piaget. Their brains are not developed to do that yet. So this isn't a deficit of the student. It just means we have to be more explicit like the instructors.
It's like transparency and metacognition and thinking about what it is, helping the student be clear about why we're doing what we're doing. And can the student communicate that? And so that's both content and these soft skills. I want to end with one last question.
Sure.
This is that big elephant. I want to ask you about AI. What do you say to teachers who ask you, how do I build AI into my classroom so that they're learning the skills they need? What are those conversations that you're having out there?
Yeah, I talk to my students a lot about what is it appropriate to use AI for and what is it not. It is not appropriate to say to AI, I have to write a persuasive essay that's X number of words with 5 citations. And then I copy and paste whatever the hard lessons my students have learned just this year is that AI actually creates many false citations. So that's the first thing I do. I check their citations, and when I find one that's fake, I know they probably used AI. So don't cheat with it, but it can, like when you are stuck and you need some creative ideas, it can get that going for you. I do require Vanderbilt. We have ways that you cite AI now if you're using it in your work and in your assignments. But one class I teach is on lesson planning, unit planning. I let them use AI to get ideas, but then they have to tell me like, okay, you're in a inner city school, low SES, high ELL pop, high SPED pop. How are you going to take this lesson plan and differentiate it for the population that you are going in to teach next week? What does that look like? So they have to think deeply about how do I take what this has been given and actually make it applicable for my students. So I don't always ask them to start from blank paper, but it can be a copy and paste situation.
I had a student, I think the first time it's happened, that in their paper had the parts where it'll be like, this is where you would include a site.
Right.
Like I was like, read through it and take that out. Like you didn't read it?
Right.
Me to turn this into a PDF?
Get that in it.
did Ashley, you teach your students how to use AI appropriately?
Oh,
Tell us about that.
yeah, I try to because we have an AI and education commission at SREB, and I am the communications person on that team. So I got to learn from a lot of experts on our commission about how best to use it. So I try to practice what I've learned, and I do try to give them this the way you can use it. We read some articles on scare stories. A lawyer got in trouble because they used AI and AI had made up all the sites. So they actually turned in to the court a document, the brief that was completely made up sites, and the judge called them out on it, and they got some big professional discipline.
Now the client's sitting in jail.
Yeah. So we try to read those, and it's like, this is what happens when you...
What do you want them actually doing with it?
The two big things we talk about is brainstorming. For an in-class assignment, brainstorm a paper topic and show me what they turn in is their AI conversation, where they're asking it, hey, I'm writing a paper on this. Can you give me some ideas on like what that could be? I want to do a paper on that, whatever it is for them. And they kind of brainstorm with it before they start the paper. Another big one is if they get constant feedback about one particular thing, like, oh, I always get told my transitions aren't great. What would be some good transitions that would help me? Get examples of that, help you with your problem areas you're always getting called out on. My paragraphs are too long. Here's a paragraph I wrote. How could I break it up? The things that they know they're going to get counted off for that they struggle with, they can get it to help them with that. So those are the two big areas.
Nicole, you talked about your students in college. Do you have any recommendations for high school teachers or counselors who are working with kids?
Specifically with AI?
Yeah.
I think it's all the same. This transcends grade levels.
Right.
Granted, how you would give the directions or how you would introduce it would vary between a 10-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 17-year-old. But I think ultimately we're teaching them the same kinds of things with it and really thinking about ethical use.
One use that I used it for that was so powerful was I had a meeting that was agreed to be recorded. I grabbed the transcript, and this was a coaching conversation with another teacher. And I asked it to give me feedback on how I provided support for that teacher. And it was very kind, but it was honest. And it told me some things. And you can say, as an expert teacher, and what points did I miss? What did she say? And it said that I said something. And I was like, I didn't say that. I did. So you can, you talk about problem solving and critical thinking and reflection are key employment skills. And it can help you get feedback and improve your work. I think that's another professional skill is learning how to learn and learning how to get better at your job. And it can actually help you get better at your job.
I like to tell it, please be the devil's advocate here and don't tell me the good things. Just tell me why this was not great. Make it harsh to me.
Yeah, I could even see where you're in a group and if you have roles and norms, like having an AI norm, your job is to get feedback from AI on our ideas. Here's our PowerPoint. We're going to put it in there, and I want you to ask it what it thinks and then share with us the best important things.
Yeah.
Doable. We need some good use cases out there to really see.
I think the exciting thing is, and SREB is a leader in this, is that this is why we should go to conference, right? This is why we should listen to podcasts and webinars. There are experts that this is what their job is, how to use AI effectively for educators. What should ethical guidelines look like? How should we teach with it? And so I like to think of myself as a continuous learner and always trying to better my teaching craft. But to do that, I need to go to conferences like yours and sit in on sessions in those areas where maybe I have a gap and it's not my strong suit or it's a little out of my comfort zone to want to use or teach AI. I know for myself, I'm getting more comfortable with it the more I'm learning how to use it and ways that you can use it I never dreamed of. I'm guessing you all are going to have sessions around AI at your conference. I know you're doing a lot of work in that area at SREB.
Well, you are going to be one of our featured presenters on Thursday. So we hope that if you've listened to this and you want to learn more about how to think about making your curriculum and your instruction aligned with the needs of the workplace, this is going to be a great session for you. And if you haven't gone to the session, you can share this with your colleagues and they can hear about some of the great ideas and suggestions that Nicole has. We appreciate you coming on. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing your instruction. And we can't wait to see you in the conference this summer.
Thank you, Daniel and Ashley. This has been the highlight of my day. And I can't wait for conference and hope I get to meet our listeners.
Thank you for listening to this episode brought to you by the Southern Regional Education Board. SREB is a nonprofit dedicated to improving education from pre-K all the way to PhD and into the workforce. Visit sreb.org for resources on instructional practices, teacher data, career pathways, and more. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook at SREB-School Improvement and on Twitter/X and Instagram, both at SREB Education. See you next week.